It's all fun and games until someone has to be the Nazis.
You remember the Polygon explains Warhammer 40k video I did a little while ago, where I described it as an onerous but necessary task? Well, this is one of those again, as apparently we are revisiting the extra credits stop normalizing Nazis argument from years and years ago. I would not have expected that to be an argument that needed revisiting, considering extra credits spent the next 4 or 5 years getting dragged through broken glass over that take, but here we are. It seems a near uniquely dim-witted hill to plant one's tombstone upon, but I am but a simple-minded executioner, here to explain why this is just kind of dumb. Really rather stupid, in fact. In large parts due to what I theorize to be the catalyst for this somewhat out-of-nowhere idea, that the reason why historical wargames aren't as popular as 40k is because there's Germans in them, which we'll get to in a second, but this part right here of the video was what caught my attention.
I asked Hattie which one she wanted to paint for the video, and she said, "Please don't make me paint the Nazis." And that got me thinking.
As my immediate knee-jerk reaction was, oh, your female had a thought, and so you elected to repeat that thought as vociferously as possible. For obvious reasons. And my first thought after that was, hold on, Arch, that is an incredibly uncharitable interpretation, and you definitely shouldn't put that in a video. But then I scrolled up the Twitter thread where this first came to my attention. Thank you, by the way, for the 24 people who sent me this. And thank you as well to Warhammer Elves for bringing it to mine and everybody else's attention, as this was the tweet I was given a lot of times. Oh, and yes, incidentally, I also got the one from a random person claiming that the Tyranids are Jews. I frankly have no further comment on that, and I would instead rather like to thank my wokest friends on the internet, because honestly, without people like this, I would have no idea that I was supposed to view the Tyranids as Jews. It simply would not have occurred to me. But to return to the point a bit further up the Twitter thread was this. Now, this feels a little bit too close to mud for me most of the time, but it also appears substantiated. And, well, if you were recently done with tossing the mother of your children out of a house and had recently shacked up with a new woman, then that would provide a plausible explanation for why something that sounds like complete and utter idiocy to everybody else might sound like genius to one particular person's ears. So maybe my knee-jerk reaction was actually rather spot on, as now we arrive at the meat of the matter, namely that playing the Germans is apparently what makes historical wargaming less popular than 40k? Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Please don't make me paint the Nazis. And that got me thinking, isn't that really the main problem with historical wargaming?
This has so many levels to it. Okay, let's begin at the very most basic one, shall we? Okay, so the hypothesis here is that historical wargames lack popularity and will always do so because they've got the Germans in them. Okay, so the only solution to this question would be to remove the Germans, surely. Now you've got a historical wargame without the Germans. A World War II historical wargame without the Germans. Can you see the problem here? Because it seems as if your complaint defeats the entire purpose of the game's existence. This is literally having a wargame without a war, as all you'd be left with is, what, Americans and Brits fighting Italians? Are the Italians not bad enough, perhaps? Are they exempt this ban for reasons of them feeling yucky to play? I mean, on the very face of it, this argument seems to be instantaneously self-defeating. And yet here we are. So, okay, why are we doing this? Well, here's why.
But we've got to talk about the elephant in the room here. Or maybe the fascist in the gaming club?
It's because of the Nazis. Again, those goddamn Schnazis. There's never been fewer of them, and yet we can't stop hearing about them. And he immediately goes on to say,
now, let me be really, really clear here. We're not accusing anyone of anything, we're both just genuinely curious as to why historical wargaming isn't as popular as the make-believe stuff we all love.
And I don't buy it. For even a singular solitary instance, the last shred of charitability has long since been beaten out of me on this particular subject. You are not making a good faith argument here. You are not being curious or asking a simple question like, hey, could it be that historical war games aren't popular because there's Germans in it? Because it is a historical war game. If you remove the Germans, it is no longer a historical war game. This point really shouldn't require reinforcing. And as for the other argument, why isn't it as popular as 40k? Oh, I don't know. Well, let's see here. So, wargaming is already a niche genre, a niche franchise, a niche game, which has only very recently begun to gain some element of mainstream attention purely because of Warhammer 40k, which is by far the biggest and probably oldest entity. Bolt Action came around in 2012. Warhammer Fantasy emerged in 1983. Why is one more popular than the other? Well, I don't know. The 30-year head start might be part of the explanation. But more directly, it is because historical wargaming is a niche within a niche, and World War II historical wargaming specifically is a niche within a niche within a niche. And you are comparing it to, again, by far the largest and the most popular science fiction franchise, which is in and of itself more popular than history, Warhammer 40k. This is not a good faith question, by any stretch of the imagination. Granted, I would allow ignorance as a defense, but that would also be about it. But I don't think that's the case. Rather, I think simple, good old-fashioned, poorly thought-through moral outrage is the reasoning, as this is the primary argument.
Is historical wargames like Bolt Action. Basically, someone has to play as the Nazis, or at least a Nazi-allied army. Understandably, some people might feel that playing as the Nazis is inherently immoral or offensive, regardless of the historical context. It seems maybe a bit yucky or weird to be having fun playing as them or collecting them.
Some people might be offended. Some people might not like it. That is essentially what the argument boils down to. And it is an unbelievably poor one, because here's the thing. I have the perfect solution to the problem of somebody not liking a thing. Here it comes. Go away and do something else somewhere else. Voila! Problem solved. And hey, that might sound dismissive, because it is, and because we have tried the other solution. We have tried the, hey, include these people in your hobbies. But hold on. This person wants to ruin my hobby? Why should I include them? Well, just try. And, well, we saw what happened. And in this case, too, this isn't a theoretical. Your position is that playing as the Germans might be inherently immoral. As in, it is a natural part of that thing to be evil and immoral. This is the strongest moral condemnation you can possibly level against something. And the only way to solve this in a historical wargame like this would be to remove the Germans, or to replace them with, I don't know, fluffy teddy bears or something. At which point, it is no longer a historical wargame. Your complaint, if seen to its logical conclusion, would destroy the thing you are talking about. And that is an inescapable consequence of this line of, I hesitate to use the word, reasoning. And the argument is repeated a couple more times, including this segment.
Playing a game where one player is controlling the Nazis might not sit right with a lot of people. In simple terms, games that are based in realism, portraying real life death and destruction that happened, is going to turn a lot of people off.
And yet again, my solution is incredibly simple. So what? Everything doesn't need to be the biggest thing in the world. A historical wargame doesn't have to be the biggest game on the block. It doesn't have to be larger than 40k, especially when fixing it to make it more popular will make it not a historical wargame. It is fine for people to enjoy a historical wargame and be allowed to enjoy that historical wargame without somebody coming from the outside and going, yeah, but it's the Germans though. Don't you think they're bad? And that, of course, is the immediate next and the real, in my opinion, argument.
Also, let's not pretend that far-right groups don't still exist, and that their supporters might be into tabletop games.
And yet again, the silhouette of the Schnazi appears on the distant horizon. My god, you'd think they'd be everywhere considering how much we hear about them, but this really is the core of why this is happening. The far right is apparently enjoying something. And we can't have that. That really is the core of this, isn't it? Well, I don't like these people, and they seem to be enjoying this thing. I don't like them enjoying things. Here's the thing. If this is the argument, that bad people like a thing, and they even like it maybe because it's a bad thing, then surely we've got some more factions to ban from our historical war games, don't we? The Soviets, for example. If you want to talk body counts, oh, Stalin dwarves the Austrian painter by quite the margin. Hell, we can expand this yet further, as none of the sides in World War II were entirely free of a little bit of war crimes here and there. We can go rather granular on this one, but really, we don't need to, because at the end of the day, this is a bloody game. And frankly, I don't care why you're playing it. This too is one of the main divides in the modern year. So Midwinter Minis goes out to outline some of the reasons why he believes it's okay to play the Schnazis in the form of painted plastic. Like, you like their appearance, or you want to be a power gamer, or you're a professional historian who's interested in their history. Okay, here's the thing. I don't think you need a reason to play with plastic toys. I genuinely don't. If you like playing with the toys, and you enjoy playing with the toys by themselves, then you're free to enjoy playing with the toys. And at that point, I don't care if you are an actual, legitimate, honest-to-God, goose-stepping Schnazi. I don't care if you read Mein Kampf every day before you go to bed. So long as you're gonna come to the hobby store, play the game, and not talk about it or bother anyone else with your nonsense fantasies, then I don't care. The exact same way that I don't care if communists play the game, so long as they don't try to change it. And there are plenty of far-left extremists playing these games as well. Like my favorite example of Sig-Marxism, talking about burning down buildings during the protests in America where people were killed. Surely, if the Schnazis are bad, then these guys are equally horrible, and there's a hell of a lot more of their ilk around. But even so, I maintain the position that so long as you're there to play the game, as it is, mind you, then I don't care about your politics. It is when you try to force your politics and your value systems onto the game, at its detriment more often than not, near universally in fact, as is what is happening here with Midwinter Minis, that is the point at which everyone should go, no. Your ideas are not welcome here. Either play the game and accept it as it is, a historical wargame, and stop complaining about the history in it, or go play something else. Hell, play the same game, but with your friends, where nobody needs to play the Germans. You can just have the Americans and the Brits shooting at one another. If nothing else, that would be fun. And it seems to be the only theoretical solution to the problem of the Germans being inherently immoral. Which also, and I almost feel like this is a petty thing to mention, but right in the middle of the video, there is of course an ad from World of Warships, a historical, quote-unquote, game in which you play as, amongst other things, the Nazis. Hold on now, didn't you mention a little while ago that it could be perceived as inherently immoral to play as the Germans? Well, sir, I do believe you are naturally evil by your own definition. And considering some of the earlier things, grumble, grumble, grumble. And that, pretty much, brings the video to its conclusion, as he reiterates his question again. Why can't Bolt Action, a much newer, much smaller, and much more niche game, become bigger than 40k?
So, on paper, it's all coming up Bolt Action. So, why can't it knock 40k off the top spot? Is it because someone has to play the Nazis?
Again, there is no part of me whatsoever that looks at this and thinks, yes, this is a good faith question. This is clearly just an attempt to start a conversation. No, it obviously is not, as the answer itself is blindingly obvious, and the rationale for why it isn't good enough is because the historical wargame is historical. I've seen some brainlet takes in my time, but this truly is a brand new level. Although, to be fair, I suppose it is also kind of par for the course, isn't it? Hello there, I'm new to this hobby. I would like for the core parts of the hobby, it being historical, to change. Welcome me, please. Well, Bolt Action, welcome to popularity. I hope it treats you just a tiny bit less cruelly than it has treated every single other franchise. Good luck. You're going to need it. Well, actually, considering the way the winds are blowing, you might actually be fine, but it is still far too early to say. And that pretty much wraps up my video too. The argument at its very face is just dumb. There seems to be no other way to describe it as you go into a historical wargame and then complain about it having historical factions. On the face of it, this video should never have been made. But, oh well, it provides us with another opportunity at gatekeeping, I do suppose. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.